Well, welcome back. Welcome back, everyone. Today is April 22nd, 2020, and we are celebrating Earth Day. It's actually the anniversary of 50 days of Earth Day, and there are some exciting things happening today. People are finding ways to celebrate our planet online and virtually. And here at the core, we have some special guests that we will be speaking with today. We've got Rachel Malarich, who is the City Forest Officer with the Board of Public Works and the City of Los Angeles. So we are thrilled to have her join us today, as well as my colleague, Carlos Campero, who is with the Los Angeles Conservation Corps and is located at our Compton Creek Natural Park. So again, let's enjoy and celebrate in any way that we can. Earth Day. Earth Day began back on April 22nd in 1970. We will be sharing some links here with our video. If you're listening to this on SoundCloud, we'll include it in the description. And if you're watching on YouTube, we will include links to some beautiful videos, images, and some great links and resources for ways that you and your family and our fellow Corps members at the LA Conservation Corps can celebrate Earth Day. So I'm Melissa Morgan. I'm the marketing manager for the LA Corps. And also with me is my colleague, Adrienne Calbreth, who's helping us get through these slides in this conversation, not conservation today. So today, people are flooding the world with hope, optimism, and action online. You can check out earthday.org as well as some other websites and find people on social media with the hashtag Earth Day 2020 to see what's the conversation happening. All right, let's jump right into it. We are going to introduce our first guest. We've got Rachel with the City of Los Angeles. And let me tell you a little bit about Rachel. Rachel was brought on, as you'll see on this next slide, by the mayor. The mayor brought her on to be the city forest officer here within the Board of Public Works. And she's helping to implement the urban forestry goals that have been outlined in Los Angeles' Green New Deal. You might have heard of that. Search for hashtag Green New Deal, and you'll see some great coverage over this past year. So some of the goals that Rachel is helping to spearhead are planting 90,000 trees. It's a lot of trees by 2021, and also increasing the tree canopy by at least 50% by 2028 in areas with the least shade. And those tend to be the city's hottest low-income communities, which we know a lot about at the LA Corps. Our Corps members often are helping plant trees across the city. And Rachel is going to give us a little bit more background about all of this and tell us why are trees so important. We've got a couple tree huggers with us, so let's hear their voices. Let's see their faces. Rachel, welcome. Are you there?
I am. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being part of this conversation today. We're glad that we can still connect even with everything going on with the pandemic. Can you tell us a little bit about your profession? What is it? What does your job title mean? What's it all about?
Yeah, so I'm really fortunate to be the City of Los Angeles' first city forest officer. And that role was created because the city of LA is really big. You know, we're almost 500 square miles. You have a number of different sites to cover the whole city as the core, right? You can't just be coming out of one location. And with that, there's a need for coordination. So sometimes, different departments are handling trees slightly differently, maybe not with the same priorities. And so this role was created to really have that common vision for our urban forest and make sure that we're making decisions in each of our departments that guide towards that common vision of what do we want trees in our communities to look like? What is a healthy urban forest for LA? And how can we make sure that every neighborhood has it? And so part of that obviously is the goal you already mentioned, which is increasing canopy by 50% by 2028 in our areas of greatest need. We had a LiDAR study done, and that's just a real fancy way of, they use some really high-tech imaging to look at canopy cover in Los Angeles a couple years ago. And in spite of a number of efforts by the Corps and by other groups for over a decade and decades of work in urban forestry, the areas that haven't had tree canopy cover and trees in their communities still don't have a lot of trees. That's what that study showed us, is that we still have areas where some communities have 30% canopy cover, others have 5%. And canopy cover talks about the amount of space covered by shade, how much of your neighborhood is covered by trees and the benefits that they provide. And so I'm going to be looking at a number of different strategies for how we accomplish that goal. And part of that is planting those 90,000 trees. And I'm actually really excited to be participating in this call because core members are a huge part of that goal. I obviously, if I was planting 90,000 trees, I'd need to be out with a shovel right now. But we're able to reach that goal. We're going to be able to reach that goal by the end of next year because of groups like the Conservation Corps that are out there planting trees and talking to community members and getting those trees out in our neighborhoods.
Who are some of your other partners, Rachel? Yeah, that's a lot of trees. Who else works with the city to do all of this tree planting?
So we do have, our city departments, Urban Forestry Division and Recreation and Parks that are planting some of the trees. But our nonprofit collaborative through City Plants is really the engine. Those nonprofit groups, Cleaner and Greener East LA, Tree People, Koreatown Youth and Community Center, Northeast Trees, and Los Angeles Beautification Team, all under that umbrella of the City Plants Collaborative, are putting out at least, I want to say that they're doing close to 65 to 70,000 of those 90,000 trees are going to be done by the efforts of that collaborative.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah,
that is awesome. One of those great examples of how it really takes a village to work together and build better communities for everyone. Thank you, Rachel. 100%. I want to bring in my colleague. He's a bit of warm sunshine. His name is Carlos Campero, and he is our Director of Conservation Programs, who's located over at our Compton Creek Natural Park. So, Carlos, are you on the line?
Yes.
And on video? Great. I'm not sure if your camera's on yet.
Yeah.
Great. Oh, cool. Excellent. Tell us a little bit about your title. Tell us a little bit about how much you love trees, and I think you have some special certifications around it. Give us a little background.
Yes. Well, I'm the director of the Compton site for the LA Corps. I've been working for the LA Corps for a little over 30 years. I started out when I was almost 19 years old. And I was working here part-time and then started full-time. I have worked my way up from crew supervisor to graffiti specialist to coordinator to manager, and now the director of the Compton site. My job or my responsibility is I see myself as a motivator, as a coach, as a fiscal responsible person, looking for ways to keep us solvent through projects that help the community and improve my core members' skill set and opportunities for me as a tree hugger, which I have that sticker on the back of my Subaru. I drive a Subaru. I don't have Birkenstocks, but I do drive a Subaru, and I love trees.
That's awesome.
Years ago, we were on a naturalist took us on a hike. This is my first day working at the LA Corps, and he taught us about native trees and non-native trees. And he pointed to a tree and he said, "You see how someone carved on this? There's been an experiment done where people hooked up microphones to a tree as they carved in it, and you can hear the tree scream." And at that moment is when I realized that, because that hurt me. And that's when a switch clicked in my head, and I began to really look at and love urban forestry. So I'm a certified arborist. An arborist is a person who studies tree biology, tree maintenance, tree pruning, tree planting, tree species, anything with having to do with arboriculture. And so I have an affinity and a love for trees. I'm what they call a tree nerd. And anytime I can expose the young people that I'm responsible for to the field of urban forestry is always a plus. And this industry is aging out, meaning there are a lot of people that are starting to retire, and the workforce is lacking diversity and lacking some oomph and some youth, some energy. And so I'm hoping that through opportunities where we can participate in, like, for instance, planting these 90,000 trees, that we can put that same spark or love for urban forestry and trees in our young people, and they can gravitate towards that industry.
Awesome. I think we're going to tag some of our social media, hashtag tree nerds. I hadn't heard of that one before. That's great. Rachel, how did you fall in love with nature? Tell us a little bit about that.
You know, there's so many different avenues through which nature was, you know, a huge part of my life. I grew up and had quite a bit of energy as a young person. I played a lot of sports. I walked to school, elementary, middle, and high school, and would always pick the shady side of the street, and, you know, would notice the leaves that's falling in the, you know, on the ground, and just was a real part of my everyday life. And when I was 10, my dad was concerned I had a lot of energy, and said, here, these are, you know, we have some space where we want to plant some trees. These are the size holes we want you to dig. Go. And so I planted those trees in my, you know, in our very small backyard. And those trees are still there. I wish my parents had picked slightly bigger tree species, because then they'd be really cool at this point, because it's been a while. But that connection to the earth and, like, being able to do something with my own hands was really powerful. And my family spent a lot of time in the out of doors. You know, that was our vacations, was going camping and what have you. So being able to be around big trees, or, you know, building tree houses with my cousins when we visited them in a more rural area. So that's more on, like, the growing up side of things. As an adult, I knew that I wanted to be serving communities like the one I grew up in, that didn't have a lot of trees. I found them on my walks to school, but we didn't have a lot of trees. And I wanted to be out of doors. And so the opportunity appeared for me to start working for Tree People in the harbor area, so San Pedro, Wilmington Harbor City area. And we were going to be doing a lot of work in parks. And so I got to spend, you know, half of my workday would be outside walking a park site or meeting with community members to talk to them about trees. And it was just like this perfect mesh of my desire to be out and interacting with people and teaching them about trees, wanting to be not indoors, which is, you know, more of my job now is indoors and in meetings and talking to people and trying to make sure we have really good policies and funding for trees. But that's really where it started. It was just, I love being outside. I loved using my hands, and I really loved learning about trees. You know, I knew some, but there's always more to learn, and it's a really wonderful community to be a part of.
Thanks, Rachel. I was just remembering back when I was a kid, I grew up on the East Coast, and both in Pennsylvania and in Florida, we had a great time with trees. I remember this forest that eventually got taken down to build a neighborhood. There were these huge, massive trees that we would climb up into as kids, and could watch people walking through the trails, and they wouldn't even know we were there. It was really super exciting to be part of that and to be in the forest like that. Trees are pretty amazing. So here in Los Angeles, life is very different from some of the places where I grew up. You know, we are this huge metropolis. Some people might say this place here has been known as a concrete jungle, but really the work, Rachel, that you and your colleagues are doing, and core members and Carlos and team and crews, folks are doing things to put more green in the community, to address, I've heard of urban heat islands, things like that. Can you tell us what are some reasons that planting trees has been really a huge focus in LA and a way to fight climate change? How does that really help? Yeah, so obviously when we're looking at climate change, there's really large systemic changes that we need to make, like reducing our transportation and industrial emissions, and that can take time. Trees, however, provide an immediate impact and benefit in our community. So when you plant a tree, you're already providing cleaner air, an opportunity to capture and store stormwater, you know, all the benefits that trees provide us, as well as beautifying our communities. And they increase their impact over time. So whereas most of our other infrastructure in the city, you know, as it ages, it loses value and gets closer to being
needing to be replaced, trees grow and add value over time. And so they provide an immediate remedy to some of the things we're experiencing, like urban heat islands, by providing shading and cooling through transpiration. Trees release and transpire, release moisture into the air overnight and can actually help cool our communities during the summertime evenings in a way that's, I think, sometimes more impactful than the shade during the day, because it can help drop the total temperature in the area. So they're a really important tool in the toolbox for us in terms of improving quality of life for our residents while we try and make the larger changes that are going to make this a more sustainable place to live. And one of the things I really like is that tree planting is something that everyone can participate in some way, shape, or form, whether or not you plant trees at your house because you have space to do that, or have a street tree planted in front of your property, or you can volunteer with any number of those groups that I mentioned earlier to plant trees to make Los Angeles cooler, have cleaner air, and be a better place for all of us to live.
Carlos, I know over at Compton Creek Natural Park, you have a lot of trees and some special features at the park. Can you tell us a little bit about them and why you all selected to plant those trees as you were revitalizing this space?
Sure. So Compton Creek Natural Park is literally just that. It's a park with natural features and as close as native trees as you can get to Southern California. In the city of Compton, there aren't a lot of parks and there isn't a lot of park space. So our park is diamond in the rough. We have mostly oaks and sycamores, California sycamores. And so those are trees that are native to Southern California, not necessarily. Southern California is more of a Mediterranean climate, so there aren't a lot of trees per se, but these are as close as you can get. And so the idea is that they will enhance the park in terms of beauty, but also they provide a large amount of shade. As Rachel mentioned, they clean up the air. They just bring a sense of peace and tranquility to you. And it's always a great thing when you're able to sit underneath an oak tree. And so, it's the design of the park was geared towards having a natural setting where birds and other wildlife can find a home or somewhere to nest or somewhere to hang out during the summer, as we get a lot of birds that fly down from the north and hang out here. We're adjacent to Compton Creek, so there's also a lot of what do they call it? There's just a lot of different species that come through and hang out in the park, and it's always good to see residents enjoying looking at the park's beauty and wildlife.
So a little bit more about trees. Are there certain types of neighborhoods that you feel like need more attention and need more trees?
There's been a lot of studies done that neighborhoods or communities that are, I want to say the right phrasing, that are lower that are low income or the percentage of people of color is higher. The tree canopy is less, and so people's health suffers. There are more people with asthma. There are more health concerns. Crime is up, and believe it or not, having trees or tree-lined streets, especially streets that are used by kids going to school, when they're lined with trees, it just it helps with health. It helps with air quality. It helps with aesthetics and just an overall feeling of beauty. They're having been in this agency, the LA Corps, for so many years. There have been numerous efforts to try to populate the urban setting with more trees. And all of those are geared, or have been geared either towards reducing the heat island effect, simply just beautifying a community, cleaning up the air. There's grants available out there through something called CAL FIRE, who they provide funding for nonprofits and other state and city agencies, municipalities, to try to increase tree canopy and clean up the air. So for us, it's always a plus to be able to be part of that and, collaborate with other agencies and other municipalities, to try to increase tree canopy and in all areas of the city in Southern California, but specifically in those areas where it's called, tree canopy poor.
Rachel, are there any areas that you think you'll be focusing on more this year or in the future? Any neighborhoods?
Yeah, and so when we're looking at where to invest more immediately with additional trees, we're really using a number of different mapping tools to try and have our decisions be based in data and science, where we're going to have the biggest impact. And we're using the LiDAR study that I mentioned that we'll have a link to, that we'll share. And then we're also looking at Kellen virus screen, which shows us and measures some of those factors that Carlos was talking about in terms of defining areas as having a greater need for trees, plus that LiDAR data, which shows us where trees are and where they aren't within the city. The other really important thing for me, as we then hone in on which neighborhoods we're going to be investing in more trees, and most of our communities need additional trees, is going to be about making space for larger trees. And so I've got in the background here, I don't know if you can see it, one of my favorite visuals, which says what the city needs is a few more skyscrapers. And that's really a lot of these neighborhoods where there is low tree canopy cover, there are small tree planting locations, 4-foot wide parkways, 4 by 6 foot concrete cuts. And in those locations, we can only put trees that at their mature state, at their very biggest, are still not going to be very big. And so we need to find ways to make larger growing spaces so that we can put in trees that, while right now there's still going to be that small, 15-gallon tree that we put in all the time, but over time will be even bigger and provide more bang for our buck, so to speak, in terms of impact. And so a lot of, like I said, a lot of these communities where we need to have more trees, they don't have as much space to plant as I would like to see. And so what I'm hoping in the role that I'm in now is to not only elevate kind of the city's understanding of that, because a lot of people are like, oh, we're going to help you create more locations for trees. And I've actually shared with some planning department staff, I care less about the total number planted than the size of the location they're planted in, because if we have these large grow spaces, I'm able to put in a tree that over its lifespan will provide significantly more shade and cover to our different neighborhoods. So that's kind of one of the guiding things that I'm looking at is how do we get more big trees in our communities? And honestly, the Corps has been a great partner in the past. I've had some projects in my previous roles where we've gotten to hire Corps member crews to come out and do those concrete cuts and remove that concrete and asphalt and create the new space for trees. Actually, on the other side of the fence from you, Carlos, at Washington Elementary School in Compton, which is right up against that natural park. I remember when the park was flat and the trees weren't in yet, we did a project planting trees on campus, and the cuts on campus were done by Corps members, and those trees are there now, getting bigger, hopefully, for the kids at recess. And tremendous impact that you all have in your day-to-day work.
That's awesome. And that's a great segue, Rachel, to talk a little bit about our Corps members and what makes you proud about Corps members helping to fight climate change. One of my jobs is I get to talk with Corps members often about what do they find meaningful in their work, what are they learning, and I'm posting images, and some of the images are like you just described, Rachel, Corps members with like these huge power tools, and they're breaking through concrete, which may not look that interesting at first course, until people start to know the story that they're doing this massive, hard, heavy lifting work to break through the concrete to get to the soil and then plant a tree that then should flourish in the community. I've had Corps members say, you know, they're working in their own neighborhoods and planting trees where there once were none. And over time, they get to drive by and see these trees starting to grow and remembering like, wow, I did that. That was me. I was part of that. So tell me, what is it that makes you both proud of our young adult Corps members and how they're helping to fight climate change?
I mean, for me, it's important for me to explain to them that they're not just putting in 7 hours of work and part of those 7 hours is digging a hole and putting a tree in it. But rather what they're doing is creating a legacy for themselves and for their community. When they are, you know, whether they're cutting concrete and then removing it, recycling that concrete, amending that soil, and then planting a tree in it, every step of the way, they're making a difference. Because one, that tree is going to bring clean air. It's going to bring shade. It's going to bring beauty. It's going to bring a smile to someone's face. That tree is going to make a difference. And when they do every part of that step to get that tree planted and then maintained for 3 years, you know, through watering and minor pruning and just adjusting of stakes and ties, all of their efforts are extremely valuable. So that's how I get them to buy in, that they realize that, you know, every step that they're taking is extremely important, and that tree has a life. You know, it's important. It's not just a stick with some green leaves on it. It's an actual living, breathing thing. I often tell a story, and when I say often, I mean really often, like as often as I can, of back in 89, I think it was 89, we were planting trees on Martin Luther King Boulevard with tree people, and we were planting trees in front of the LA Memorial Coliseum, Canary Island pines. And years later, I went to a USC game with my son, and I pointed at those trees, and I said, "You see those trees, Mil?" And he said, "Yeah." And they were now probably 70 feet tall. I said, "You know, and when I was 19 years old, I helped plant those trees, and look at them now. They're big, beautiful trees, bringing shade and beauty to Martin Luther King Boulevard, and it's majestic. You know, it's you. Anytime you see a panoramic shot of the LA Memorial Coliseum, whether it's the Trojans or the Rams or a soccer game or something, you can't miss seeing those Canary Island pines on Martin Luther King Boulevard." And without sounding braggadocious, I had something to do with that. And those clean and green students that worked with me to plant those trees had something to do with that. And we can always go to that and say, you know what, I had something to do with planting that tree. And so I tell my young people all the time, you know, you can go back in 20 years and see your work paid off, because that tree is bringing a smile to someone's face. It's bringing a sense of calm,
right?
And it's cleaning the air. It's bringing shade, you know, all of those things. And that's how we have to think of every tree we plant is a living entity, and it's going to give us something back. You know, and so that it's, you know, and some people roll their eyes, some people giggle, and because of the sense of urgency or the passion I have about trees, but really it just really clicked for me years ago, and that's, you know, I really am a tree nerd in that I get really fired up whenever we talk about trees, as I hope you can tell.
Rachel, how about for you? You probably see Corps members working with planting trees. Sometimes we get to work with students from local elementary schools. You know, what's the benefit of young people working in their own neighborhoods planting trees? What do you see as that benefit?
Well, there's a number of them, and Carlos has really touched on this, immediate benefit that they're providing to their own community and to our neighborhoods. But one of the things that's really important for me, and I really would love for core members to understand, is I can't, my tree nerdiness and Carlos's tree nerdiness can't be everywhere all the time. And we really, core members are far better ambassadors to their neighbors and neighborhoods when it comes to talking about the need for trees as well as proper care of trees. So when we're looking at, being able to, one of the things, unfortunately, that's a barrier in Los Angeles to planting trees is people's perceptions of trees and whether or not they are attractive or bring added value to our communities. And having core members that have that direct experience planting and caring for trees and impacting the community really have a story to tell. They can share their perspective with their neighbors and relatives around the importance of trees and why it is important for us to have those, as well as, maybe why people shouldn't be pruning them improperly or topping them or removing them when they're healthy. I am just so excited for the potential of having core members as ambassadors in their neighborhood to talk about urban forestry and about trees. I also hope that with the experience that they're having now, one of the hopes in the role that I'm in is to continue to build that avenue towards this workforce. Carlos mentioned at the beginning of the conversation, it's true. Urban forestry is a field where we have a lot of staff that are aging out and retiring, which is fantastic. They've had wonderful careers and contributed a ton, but I would love to see core members start to, move into these roles and be the next generation of our urban foresters and arborists doing this really important work to care for trees over their lifespan in Los Angeles.
Yeah, that's really cool. I think it's really nice to be able to have these opportunities where core members and other young adults can virtually meet people like you or hear you or meet you in person to learn about these roles, these cool jobs that are out there that maybe they never even knew existed. Given the current situation with the coronavirus and people working from home or remotely, we were wondering, how are you both staying positive right now and focused on your work to promote urban greening? I imagine it's a little bit unique. Just what are you taking from all of this and what's keeping you motivated and helping you to maintain a sense of hope right now in your work?
I'm going into City Hall still sometimes to do some of my work, but a lot of it I am doing remotely at this point in time, which means that without the commute, I have a little bit more time to be walking in my own neighborhood. At work, I usually go for a walk at lunchtime across the street in Grand Park, also installed by core members, some of it. But at home, as I'm walking with my kids and having our walks outside and in our local park be our limited time where we're not being safer at home, I'm just reminded of how much trees have an impact on how I feel. And getting to see members of my community out, running or walking or going to the grocery store, and again, looking for the shady side of the street, or even for myself, being able to go to the park and be under trees with my kids and be able to play kickball and use trees as the base, or, I've gotten to have more of that personal relationship with the trees around me. And that reminds me of how important they are. Every community should have trees in their neighborhood that provide that shade, that provide that cooling, and give us that wonderful, place to picnic or, sit in a shady spot. That's been really good for me to kind of reconnect with how trees influence myself and walking in my neighborhood. And honestly, part of the work I'm doing right now is coordinating with the nonprofit partners and making sure that they get really clear messaging, from the city on what protocols they need to be putting in place to make sure that they stay safe and make sure that we keep tree planting and tree maintenance as essential services that can continue during this time. And making sure that we really understand how to do that carefully and thoughtfully to keep everybody healthy.
Very cool. So we've got a couple minutes left. Carlos, I know that you've probably got something you'd like to share. In addition to what's keeping you hopeful, what's like the coolest thing you think you've done to help the environment in your job?
The coolest thing I've done? Wow, that's... I guess for me, the coolest thing is hope. I hope that I've been able to motivate young people to think bigger, think globally, that every effort they put into increasing our tree canopy and helping the health of our urban forest really resonates with them, and they realize that they're making a difference with every tree that they plant, with every bucket of water they pour onto a new tree. And then just to go back to what you had asked earlier is, how do I stay motivated or keep promoting urban forestry during this COVID-19 crisis, is I look to my young people for motivation. I see them coming to work every day, and I want to make sure they know that what they're doing has value. And I assign value to what the work they do. You know, during this time, it's extremely important for them to know that just simply coming to work and not giving up is important. It's a blessing. It strengthens us as an agency, because there are people relying on us. You know, I've been around a long time at the Corps, and we've gone through fires and floods, earthquakes, and each time, whether it's the city or the county or the state, they rely on us to step up and help out. And this crisis is no different. Some of our crews are going to start working on food distribution and other projects that way. And other crews are continuing to clean up city streets, and others are planting trees. We'll be cutting concrete next week to get more trees in the ground. And so every effort we make is important. It makes a difference. And that's what motivates me. And that's what I try to instill in our young people.
Just kind of in closing, today for Earth Day and all month, folks are really focusing on climate change. Rachel, what would you say people need to know about climate change?
That's a heavy question. What should people know about climate change? Well, one of the easiest ways for them to contribute to changing things is planting a tree. And they can do that if they're a City of LA resident, can do that through our City Plants program, our City Plants website. And actually right now, City Plants, I'm not sure how long it will last, but we're doing some virtual adoptions where typically, we'd have core members or other groups go to farmers markets or different events to give away trees in person. We can't do that right now. And so we're allowing people to sign up online if they haven't already received their 7 free trees. And I believe right now you can get 1 fruit tree and 1 shade tree if you get a shade tree, you can get a fruit tree, at least 1 for your yard, to those virtual adoptions, which we don't always offer. So planting trees is one way. And then, again, I think a lot of things we look at, I personally think a lot about transportation when it comes to climate change, how we can be better about using the resources we have and lessen the amount that we're driving when possible. So, taking public transit, walking, biking, I know a lot of us are already doing that. But find a way to plant a tree, and if possible, get a bigger species. And it sounds like Carlos, I shared, hopefully with this, we can share some of the resources. I shared Select Tree and a couple other resources for selecting trees. Be very careful about which kind of tree you pick, and reach out to a tree nerd to help you pick a good species.
I love it. Reach out to a tree nerd. That's wonderful. So in closing, before we go, we'll share a couple web links, but what's your last tip on how you think people could advocate for the environment and celebrate Earth Day and Earth Month this year?
Keep talking.
Again, work. Let people know. Oh, go ahead, Carlos.
No, I was just going to say, keep talking about it. It's first of all, climate change is real. Just look around us. It's pouring in April, and now I think tomorrow or Friday it's going to be in the 90s. If that's not a wake-up call, I don't know what is. And so one of the things that we can do is play your part. Turn off the water when you're lathering up and you're showering. When you wash your hands or brush your teeth, turn off the water. Go out and plant a tree. Volunteer. There's so many opportunities. Once this thing is over, we're gonna be planting this summer and this fall. So go out and look for opportunities to help wherever a tree planting is happening. I guarantee that once you're done planting, you're going to feel so good and you're going to want to do it all over again.
And I would add that if you care about urban forestry and about trees in your neighborhood, that it can be a little daunting, but reaching out to your local officials and letting them know that urban forestry and trees are important to you is also helpful, because we know that we're going to be dealing with some economic crunch, and our elected officials like to hear what's important to us when they're making decisions about where they put resources. And we definitely want to make sure that our urban forest continues to be well resourced, and let them know that you care about trees, and let your community members know about the work that you're doing planting trees and why that's important.
Very cool. Thank you both so much. We've got a couple links to share with people. Rachel comes out of the mayor's office, so you could visit www.lamayor.org to learn a little bit more about what's happening around the city. We've also got earthday.org, where you can participate online with people around the globe. Literally, people across this planet are celebrating Earth Day today. And you can find them on social media at Earth Day Network. And if you're interested in becoming a core member, maybe you'd like to become a tree nerd, and if you'd like to help plant trees and gain some amazing skills in green careers, then check us out at www.lacorps.org/enroll. That's lacorps.org/enroll. And check out this hashtag today. It's hashtag Earth Day 2020, where you can find all the conversations going on about Earth Day. And if you are a resident in the city of LA, you can get a tree. So check us out on our website to learn more about how to get a tree from our partners and friends over at the city with City Plants. And please be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We're at LA Corps. That's LACORPS. So from my backyard with our new compost pile and garden and our little baby tree that just sprouted some green leaves, I want to thank everyone for being part of this conversation today. Thank you, Corps members, for being out there. You've been called to serve and to really be on the front lines, helping our environment and our community, helping people to stay safe and healthy. We just want to thank you all, as well as all my colleagues like Carlos and all of my colleagues at the Corps. Rachel, your team, thank you all for supporting this incredible environmental work we do. And happy Earth Day, everyone. Thanks a lot.